feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Wednesday afternoon. It's August 23rd. And Kyle, I'm excited to be back doing some pods. I think it's been like 3-4 weeks since we've done an episode. I think a break was nice and necessarily, and I don't think anything happened. New Jersey's schedule. I don't want to do podcasts on this anyways. So we're going to focus on this because the World Cup is coming. There's been games going on. They officially begin this weekend. You might be thinking like, what? It's just starting this weekend. I've seen all these. Everyone's talking about Anthony Edwards. Those were exhibition games before the World Cup. It actually starts like in earnest this weekend. So, I mean, Kyle, we've been texting about this a lot. I think I've hit the point where I'm bored and I want to start like watching basketball again. I feel like FIBA's cool all of a sudden. Like I kind of watched like last year with Eurobasket, but maybe you can give a sales pitch to people of why they should be watching the World Cup here and what you've kind of enjoyed about watching these exhibition games.
Oh, I mean, the sales pitch is that it's August 23rd. And if we don't talk about FIBA, we're going to talk about either a shirtless Jaden McDaniels in some high school gym down in Southern California, or we're going to talk about Rudy Gobert playing flip cup and shooting 3-pointers for FIBA. For his national team. So it is cool, right? Like you forget how, I know I was thinking back, I don't know how many years ago it was, but like the Kevin Love for Andrew Wiggins trade kind of came in like September. And like, that was awesome from a content standpoint, even though I don't even know if I was covering the team then. So this is really dry. It's jerseys. It's 1-on-0 workout videos. It's who unfollowed who at Butt Crack Sports. Like it's all that type of stuff. So real basketball. And I think after getting like a nice, mozzarella sticks of exhibition games, you're like, okay, I'm actually hungry for like real basketball. Mm-hmm. And to answer your actual question, I think FIBA basketball is better than the NBA. Like that's how I like watching basketball. Like it's physical. You know what's funny that we never think of? Why does the NBA have so many timeouts? Like if Chris Finch has to use a timeout with 4:30 left in the third, or he's gonna lose it, maybe we shouldn't give him that extra timeout. You know what I mean? Like let's have less stoppages, more physicality, quicker pace game. I just think the FIBA basketball is like real basketball. So it's been really fun. And then you parlay it back into the Minnesota Timberwolves and you're like, they have what? I think 5 guys that'll be playing in it, the second most behind, I think, OKC. So you have
7 if you include right. Garza has been playing in kind of this time when the exhibition games were going on for Bosnia and Herzegovina. They're not in the World Cup, which is now going to start this weekend. Also, Nickeil Spagnolo will be in the World Cup, the Wolves second round pick a couple years ago. But then, it's Anthony Edwards for Team USA, Karl Anthony Towns for the Dominican, Rudy Gobert for France, Kyle Anderson for China, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker for Canada. I've been watching a lot of this. I think it's, been fun to watch. And like the games are on at like 8 a.m. So I just watch them like once I wake up. And I've cut up a bunch of clips just to kind of highlight some things from, what has stood out from Kat or Rudy or whoever it might be. And we're just going to kind of run through those on this episode. This episode is on YouTube. So if you do want to watch on YouTube, we're actually going to put up clips on the screen and stuff. And if you're just listening, via podcast, hopefully it'll still make sense. Like picture us watching clips on the screen and talking about it. I think it'll work both ways. But if you do want to watch this on YouTube, youtube.com/@DaneMoreNBA. If you just go to YouTube and search my name, you should be able to find it. Hit subscribe, all those sort of things. We're going to be doing pretty much every episode also on YouTube this season. How did I do, Kyle? Did I promote the YouTube page well?
I mean, we did a really good job. We created that YouTube page out in Vegas, hungover without really any Wi-Fi. We posted the Chris Finch interview that had a wonderful background at the Blue Wire Studios at the Wynn. Now Dane and I are just back where we live with tan walls and a couple plants and mirrors that our girlfriends or wives planted. But no, I think it's cool. I've been bugging you. I've learned a lot about all of this. kind of doing over at SKORNorth. So Phil Mackey's been really helpful too. But just YouTube is kind of the future too. And I think as you and I are old in a sense, like you've gotten really comfortable with some of the cool things you can do with video and stuff. So if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, the goal for us this next season is for that to continue to be the same. If that's how commuting, working, whatever, we're going to keep that product the same, but we're also just going to add in YouTube. And, if you want to prefer to watch us or watch Dane do clips, it's going to be really fun. So, and we also, I think he's somewhere behind the scenes, but like Cooper Carlson, who people know from Wolves Twitter areas.
Hello.
Cooper Carlson is kind of our nephew Kyle now. So we'll be bringing Coop on. He's going to be doing a lot of editing and video stuff. But I just think, again, as Dane's always said, like this podcast is growing and we appreciate everyone who supports us or supports the people that support us, like the sponsors. So YouTube, Apple, Spotify. It is really important to subscribe, review, give us feedback. Dane has an email.
Comments, right, man?
Yeah, comments. We're going to be able to interact with people more. We're going to be able to go live after some big events. Like I always think back to when Ryan Saunders was fired on that Sunday night in New York. Like that would have been a great, let's go live and let's just be drunk and talk about it. So it's going to be a fun season and we're kind of kicking it off now, but give us some patience because Dane and I don't have a bleeping clue what we're doing. And that's why we hired Coop.
And that was Coop. Coop, you're on Twitter at Coop Carlson, I think. And he runs the Timberwolves Daily YouTube page. So make sure to check out Coop over there too. He'll be helping us out here on the back end throughout the season. Okay. That's like
FIBA.
Yes. Let's get into it. We got to start with Anthony Edwards. Honestly, Kyle, I didn't come into this FIBA play like thinking Ant was going to be like the Wolves player that I was most interested to watch. Like my experience watching Team USA is I feel like the teams are so good that there's like this overlap and you kind of see like, oh, that's what so-and-so would look like if they were a role player, right? Because everyone's kind of ends up being a role player on that team. And so I come into this like really interested to see Nickeil Alexander-Walker kind of take a bigger role or Luka Garza do things he hasn't been asked to do before. But what's stood out to me about Ant is he's in a bigger role, arguably, on Team USA than he is for the Wolves. And that has led to, I don't know, I mean, kind of seeing him stand out in a different sort of way. Obviously, he's kind of in the talk of the basketball world this week. I got some clips to get into that won't maybe be the highlight, but just some things that I think are different that stood out to me. But what's kind of stood out to you most about Ant?
I think you described that perfectly because and this is just, again, how deep the league is, how deep, United States basketball continues to be since they kind of had that stumble years ago. But yeah, when you put the Team USA together, it's always a bunch of guys that almost have to kind of like take a step back from how they play, right? Kind of to embrace the team philosophy. And then when you watch guys go to their other countries across like in Europe or South America or whatever, those guys are usually on teams that don't have a lot of other NBA talent. So their kind of player profile, their stock goes up while the Team USA guys go down. So, I mean, yeah, Rudy Gobert, like as we're going to get into, like he's an emphasized part of that offense, right? And Nickeil Alexander is like, Chris Paul for Canada. So you didn't really think that any of the NBA or Team USA guys would do that. And then Anthony Edwards just immediately, I don't even like using the term all the time, alpha, but just completely alpha everyone else on his team, a team full of guys that just signed max contracts or are franchise guys for the Pacers or the Magic or the Knicks. And it's like, no. This quickly in a couple weeks of exhibition games became Anthony Edwards' team.
And so I tried to like find some clips that I thought like highlighted that. And in watching that Germany game, which I think a lot of people saw, or maybe you just like saw some of the highlight clips afterwards, you saw like the MJ baseline fadeaway and those sort of things. But I thought what stood out most to me was Ant's taking over of the lead role and also his teammates' willingness to kind of give him that, particularly in the Germany game. And I thought it really started here where like it's the fourth quarter, they're losing to Germany. They come into the fourth quarter, I think they're down 7. They get a couple minutes into the fourth, and like Ant just recognizes it. Like you can tell right here, he's just like, all right, elbow post up. I'm going at this guy and I'm getting to the line, like exactly what they needed. And he goes to the line, he hits both free throws. And then what I thought was like super meaningful is he's guarding Franz Wagner here too. This is the very next possession. Like that whole fourth quarter, Ant's taken over, but he's also guarding Wagner. And this play, again, very possession after he just goes to the basket, gets those free throws. He's on Wagner, switches here. And this rebound, like, that's just a lot of want to there, right? Like, unfortunately, kind of rolls his ankle here.
That's it. That's the exact point where I was like, it's so cool that Ant's on Team USA. And then I was like, immediately cancel the tournament because that man is holding his ankle. Like this moment right here was like, oh, cool. All right. 20 and 62. Here we go.
So I like after that, right? That's when, we thought, I was like, okay, roll his ankle, like game's over. He's going to be done. But then he just went into this sort of takeover mode. It's 80 to 86. The US is down. And these are the like back-to-back here are just those two kind of like dagger threes you hit. And everyone kind of saw this, seeing the highlights or whatever, but that's a big hit.
It's a good point you bring up though, because we've watched every single moment of Ant, as everyone listening to this has. Pause it right here.
Yep.
And we've known that in the past, because for all the stuff that we're all like, or at least me and a lot of my friends are petty about, like comparing him to Jordan Crawford or Dion Waiters coming up, or saying that he didn't love the game. There were some aspects of him that were still like kind of a child or a young player. And when he would get injured, think of all the times that he would like immediately sub out or like call for a sub out, like, because he didn't even know how to handle an injury. And this, I know people might think I'm grasping at straws, but this was like a moment. It's like, okay, he did hurt himself to some level, even just a rolled ankle. And instead of being like, I need out, or like, I don't know how to react to this, he just literally did what we all do at the gym and tightened up his shoes and then came down and went big three. And then this one that you're showing on the screen, where he just kind of runs into transition. I mean, I felt like Jaden McDaniels here because I just kept growing. Like that's big league stuff right there. To hit those 2 threes, they went to a timeout after that, I think, and he went crazy. And then just all the basketball stuff, Dane, you need to talk about and you need to educate people on. But it's also just like you've got Tyrese Halliburton out there, Bobby Portis, who's won a ring, Austin Reeves. Like these guys are like, dude, save us, right? Like take. We need you to get us a bucket here, and to watch them all kind of become role players for this kid was the coolest part about that Germany game.
Yeah, I thought so. Like this is literally just in sequence. The clips I'm showing here. It's the three, and then I was watching it back, and I'm just watching every offensive possession, and the U.S. doesn't score. Like Ant's hit these 2 threes in a row, and so they start trying to get the ball out of his hands, right? And I just feel like through this entire fourth quarter, Ant didn't make a mistake, right? Okay, so
yeah,
put 2 on the ball here, right? Like, what do? You just like got to get off of that. This doesn't lead to a bucket, but like that's Mikal Bridges. That's a 45% corner 3-point shooter right there. That's a great possession by Ant. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. Here he's got Schroeder on him. He's like, all right, like this, I can take this into the post. But I love that the double comes right here and gets off of it. Again, doesn't lead to a bucket. Swing. There's Bridges in the corner
great
again. He misses it, but that's a clean corner 3 that Ant creates there. And then this, I think this is the possession. This one might have been my favorite. Like this, he's walled off there, pops back out, gets it again, walled off again. And that pass right there, like I'm going to go back. Like
that's Carl in the corner.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking about. I mean, it's Bobby Portis and he cranks it off the side of the backboard here. But like that is, I just think Ant kind of played a perfect fourth quarter there in that game. And it was in a way that, one, it wasn't just on offense. He's guarding Wagner on the other side of the floor, clearly like Germany's best player, their offensive hub. And then he's creating for his teammates. And it was kind of like all things we've seen Ant do, right? Like we've seen Ant lock up in the fourth quarter, guard the best player. We've seen him be a good playmaker. We've seen him make big shots. We haven't seen him do those things in tandem. And I don't think we've ever seen him do that for an entire fourth quarter. And like, yes, they weren't playing the Golden State Warriors, but that's like a legitimate FIBA team. They have a handful of NBA players, Schroeder, both the Wagners, Daniel Tice, Isak Bonga, like a bunch of like a solid FIBA team. And I just think that matters. And it's another hint at this idea that Ant, what you've been hearing from people, like Ant's dialed in. And it is this style of play is the style of play I think he intends to play, in that he's not going to be deferential anymore. Like, part of it is his playmaking. Like, he's still going to get other guys going. I'm not saying Carl's not going to score, Rudy, whoever, but I was like, all right, I can picture what this looks like with Ant being the dude and scoring when needed, defending when needed, getting big rebounds when needed, and also finding other guys. It was really, for me in my head, a pretty big, turning point in terms of what I am anticipating coming.
You know what's kind of crazy about that last clip you showed too is that I'm probably reaching a little bit, but there's like a thin line you can draw to some of these rotations that these 5-man lineups that Ant's a part of under Steve Kerr for Team USA, that are kind of like, if I squint, that could be the Timberwolves. Like, you have Rudy in like the Jaren Jackson Jr. role, which obviously Jaren Jackson is a little more of a threat from three, although this summer has been big for Rudy Gobert and his 3-point shot. But then, like, Carl could be at times a Bobby Portis, or at times he could kind of be a Brandon Ingram. Obviously, weak comparison, but like the ability to drive, the ability to create his own shot. And then, I mean, Mikal Bridges is just Jaden McDaniels. And then if you put Austin Reeves or maybe a Jalen Brunson next to Ant, like, that's kind of the Mike Conley thing. So you're also seeing it kind of translate back to your point of like, he's deferring less. And I think we can keep going on Ant, but to me, it opens a big, I mean, keep going, keep talking X's and O's, keep talking strategy, but it opens up to me what I think is probably the biggest dynamic for the actual Timberwolves for 2023, 2024. I wonder how much of their success next season is about basketball and how much of it is just personalities. Like, if Anthony Edwards wins a gold medal, and the tournament hasn't started yet, but if he wins a gold medal, you go Pat Riley and you walk into the locker room and you throw it on the table and you just say, like, this is my team. Like, I am the captain now. And getting guys like Rudy Gobert, because I know we're going to get into a clip that drove me absolutely crazy, but like, no more post-ups for Rudy. You just need to be what Jaren Jackson is for Ant. Like, block shots. He'll find you. We'll make sure that he finds you. He's showing he can pass out of the double now. He's finding guys a little more. Still a lot of room for growth there, but a lot of this just needs to be how the season ended at the post media day thing. Like, hey, everything we do moving forward is about Ant. He's showing you this summer now that has to be true, not just could be true. And first meeting of training camp, it's like, hey, listen, everyone, this is Ant's team. We still have a ton of talent. Carl, you can be an awesome, awesome second banana. But like, some of these guys, it's like, Rudy, no more spinning, hooks. Just find Ant. He'll make the right play. And he's showing you doing that at a really high level for Team USA.
Yeah. And I think, and we're going to get into Cat next and Rudy after that. Like, I think there's ways in which when I'm watching Cat have the opportunity to do more things for the Dominican, that I think that would be a great accommodation to what Ant's doing. I think some of the things and the style in which France plays that we'll get into with Rudy, like, I think you could have more of that. So Rudy is more naturally in the flow and structure of the offense. Like, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't need to be and Ant can take on a bigger role while Carl can take on a more effective role and Rudy can take on a more effective role too. Like, these things, I mean, that's the goal, right? That they can happen in tandem while Ant finds another level to sort of level up to. Kyle, let's grab our kind of first break here. We'll do this live. I wanted to start by announcing we're going to be partnering with Falling Knife again this year, and on September 7th, so coming up pretty quick, myself and Craig Kilborn are going to do a live show at Falling Knife September 7th. We're going to do the live show at 6. September 7th is the NFL season kickoff. It's a Thursday night football game. It's the Chiefs Lions, I believe. So we'll do a live show for kind of like 45, 60 minutes right there. And then people can hang out. I'll hang out afterwards to watch that NFL game at the brewery. So put that on your calendar, 6 p.m. September 7th, myself, Craig Kilborn's in town. I mean, I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about, but it's going to be it'll be fun to be there and kind of get us started on the season as things are going to kind of start ramping up here pretty quick. We're trying to ramp things up with the show as well. We're looking, Falling Knife is going to be a sponsor this year. We're in the process of looking for new sponsors for the season. If you have a company or product or a brand that you are interested in partnering with us on, you can reach out to Dane Moore Productions at gmail.com. A lot of different things we can do, particularly now with the YouTube channel too, to amplify a brand. We love the companies that we worked with last season, and I think can kind of be one of those mutually beneficial things that makes sense for us, but also helps your brewery, your restaurant, or whatever it might be. So again, that's Dane Moore Productions at gmail.com. Kyle, do you want to do your bit now? Or
oh no, I'll save that for a little bit. But back to Falling Knife. Just this will be more streamlined as we get into the actual season, right? Like we're not going to be, shouting out or asking for ads and stuff. It's kind of our new fiscal year for Dane and I as we start this all up again. So a little bit behind. I mean, some people like to know how the sausage is made and stuff, but it'll be more clean cut moving forward. But Falling Knife again has been awesome. They've been really gracious to us in terms of like hosting live events. I think that's another thing you and I want to do even more this season is just finding different ways to interact with the people that if you see us grow and take steps to build this into a real company, it's because the people that listen to this. So
for sure,
I always just want to shout them out. And I'm excited for you and Craig to do one. I think we'll probably have another, major event in October that we can kind of get a lot of fans to and just have a lot of cool guests, talk basketball, have merch, do all that stuff. So yeah, September 7th, that's a good way to kind of kick off football. Craig will definitely have some Vikings thoughts, so just get ready for that. But Craig Kilborn, who is a reoccurring guest over at Flagrant House, he's awesome, and he's really, really into the Wolves.
Oh, yeah.
Like just texting late at night on a West Coast game about his thoughts. So if you haven't heard Craig before, he's not just a celebrity; like he is a diehard Wolves fan. So go check it out at Falling Knife on September 7th. I'm going to be sad to miss it, but it's going to be an awesome time
for sure. All right, let's move over to Karl Anthony Towns. Watching him play for the Dominican, like the first thing that stood out to me was the dude was just like ready to fire. And
so sick.
I mean, this is just literally, it's like the second possession of the game, and he just pulls up from 80 feet, hits it. I mean, we're just going to kind of, these are all his sort of possessions here from the first half of their game against Canada. Again, just he caught it on the perimeter, no hesitation, looking to fire. And Kyle, it just reminded me so much of that first full Saunders Rosas season where Cat shot 8 threes a game, and there wasn't that hesitation. There was more of that perimeter orientation. And I just think this is the way in which Karl can show out more without necessarily like upping his touches, like still have the off the bounce game, like he's showing right there, getting to the basket, but more of a perimeter orientation with more of a willingness to fire. I mean, that's a real weapon next to Ant.
Yeah, and one of the things you have to point out on these clips you're showing, he's the biggest guy on the floor, right? Most of the time for either team, but definitely for the Dominican. Mm-hmm. The Dominican is one of those teams that I would say, like, I'm not very familiar with a lot of other guys' games, but not a lot of other NBA guys. So he is kind of the focal point, but he's doing exactly what we've always said, right? Like if you are
this one right here,
this is silly.
Bink.
That looks like, and people are going to lose their minds. That just looked like a Steph Curry shot, right? Where he's leaning to his left and kind of throws it out with his right hand. But this is what you want, right? Like as this becomes a little more congested in the middle, because again, the Dominican Republic doesn't have a 7'2" French guy on the team. You're going to need him to space the floor more. And if you claim to be the best at something, just lean into it. And I think that's been a gripe. And in Karl's defense, I think he was the number one guy to start last season that was trying to make the Rudy thing work. Mm-hmm. And that's why his assist numbers were a little up, and he was trying to acclimate Rudy more to, and I think that's good. I think he should be commended for that. But that doesn't need to be his job anymore. That's why you bring in all these other vets like Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, all these guys. Like
just Mike is like,
yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, our friend Jake Painting, who does a really good job with Howls and Growls, did a YouTube video this week about Mike Conley and just his connection with Rudy Gobert. And it reminded me of like, okay, you know what? Mike's the old vet. Mike, you're in charge of, you basically manage Rudy. Like you're his supervisor. You take care of him. When he calls for the ball, go yell at him. If he wants to punch someone, let it be you. Like, let Karl just be, a fringe all NBA guy. And that's what some of those threes are. Now, some of the shot selection is a little wacky, but to me, I'm actually in an exhibition game. I'm more amped that he's taking them. Right?
I mean, I don't even care about it being exhibition game, right? Like here, okay, so here that's that 2019-20 season. I got the stats up here on the video. Like Karl shot almost 8 threes a game in that 2019-20 season, made 41.2% of them. Like that, I mean, his only other year he shot better was that Tibbs and Jimmy year. He only shot 3.5 a game. He shot 42% that year. That he hasn't come anywhere near approaching that 8 threes a game that he had 4 seasons ago. That doesn't need to be the case. It shouldn't be the case. And this should tell us that he should be taking more difficult shots. There's a reason I left in the clips of the threes that he missed on there. Like, I'm cool with taking those. Let's take some more difficult ones. If he's shooting well over 40%, what that means is shoot more. It means you're a great shooter. It also means you're not shooting enough of them. And I was like, all right, so even in that 2019-20 season when he shot nearly 8 a game, I mean, look at it. He wasn't even one of the highest volume 3-point shooters in the NBA. Like, he was 17th, like shooting 7.9 3-point attempts per game. Like, that's got to be the floor, particularly given how the team around him has changed with Ant and Conley and the positions they're going to put him in to shoot here. Like, I put this graphic up here to say, like, 8 isn't even a crazy number for him to be shooting. Like, what he shot 5.7 last year. That it's got to be 2-3 more than that a game this year, and there's no reason it shouldn't be.
That graphic is pretty cool too that you had up there from Basketball Reference, because basically it was just like a linear. If Karl shoots 40%, he then becomes an all-star. Right. Obviously 2019, 2020 is different, COVID, but every other one of those years, it's like, if you just shoot, and again, now the 3-point attempts are a little down, but like if you can just shoot 40%, that is going to elevate your stock and your view around the league and the production of this team. So that's a really cool graphic. And it just reminds me, and then the one you showed as well, like, it's not that hard, right, in modern 2023 basketball to get 8 3-pointers up a game.
No.
If you're playing north of 30 minutes, right? And you're on a team that has a couple guys that just aren't 3-point shooters, and Rudy and Kyle and, even like Nickeil to a little bit. So,
well, that's what I was thinking when I showed those Ant clips after he hits those 2 big threes, and then they start putting 2 on the ball on him when they're just running pick and roll at the top. Like, teams are going to do that all the time to Ant this year. We saw it last year. It's only going to start happening more. And Ant is developing in his ability to read off of that, get off the ball when 2 guys are on him at 35 feet from the basket. Like, that's either directly a cat on the pop, looking to fire like he did in those Dominican clips, or that's that swing to the corner, and you got Troy Brown in the corner who's wide open, and he's going to be able to make 40% of those from the corner. Like, they're given the gravity that Ant is going to demand here, there is going to be ample 3-point opportunities on this team. There aren't a lot of good 3-point shooters on this team. I mean, obviously you have Cat and Conley, who are very good 3-point shooters. But beyond that, like, we don't know if Jaden's going to shoot 40% from 3. I think he shot 39 something last year. Like, there aren't a ton of other guys you can rely on to shoot threes. So that means you need to rely more on Karl to do that. I just think there's a crazy opportunity here for Karl to put in the most impressive 3-point shooting season for a big man, like, in NBA history. And while clearly being the second best player on the team. Like, I think that is totally in play this season.
I think I was the most nervous about him playing FIBA because I knew he had the least amount of like NBA talent around him, excluding Luka Garza, because actually Luka Garza plays with like Nurkic, so he has another guy in his.
John Musa, you remember him from the Nets a couple years ago? Like,
yeah, sure. And but for Carl, like he's kind of on an island, no pun intended, by himself there. But we really haven't seen. I mean, he had so few games after coming back from that injury. Like we just didn't get to really see it. And again, I don't know if that's exactly how he's going to play for his NBA team this next season, but just also like watching him move, he looks like he's moving pre-serious calf injury. And that's big because we don't really know, right? Like we don't really know what to expect. Training camp is, I think training camp is like maybe less than a month from now, because the Wolves have to start their season a little earlier with their whole kind of foreign trip for preseason. So he looks very spry, and you can make a case, even though I know we went crazy about Ant and what we're going to talk about Rudy. Like I think watching Carl play FIBA is the most important Wolves player, because I wanted to see, like, do you still got it? Like, are you trying to do too many things? Now there are some negatives that I think we should talk about that Carl also displayed.
The answer to does he still got it as a volume 3-point shooter is yes. Or that's what that's showing. And I don't know why I anticipated that to not be the case. 27, like he's not on the down curve of that. And physically, like there's just as many interesting highlights from this of him taking guys off the dribble and getting to the basket and doing so at a lot quicker pace than he was doing once he came back from the calf last year. So I think like the ideal season for Carl is the Pat Bev year. He had a lot of like pump and go to the basket, like keep that in the bag while also trying to find that 3-point volume he had from the Saunders year in 2019-20. Like the opportunity for that is absolutely going to be there. And then, yes, there's what are just your thoughts on the ejection? I know that's kind of like the Debbie Downer of this, but if we're highlighting all the positives, like we do need to acknowledge what he looked like and getting ejected from that game. What were just your thoughts when you saw the sound going here?
to close the good, they also beat the Dominican Republic, or they also beat Canada.
Yeah.
And that's like, Canada is a good team. I know they're missing a couple of guys like Jamal Murray and stuff, but that's a good team full of NBA players. Shea, Nickeil, they should not have won that game. And Carl, kind of old school Wolves, right, was just like me and a bunch of Ramon Sessions, and I beat Canada. So he should be commended for that, because again, this goes back to a much broader topic that we'll be talking about probably for the next 12 months. Is like, hey, you know what? Maybe that all-world shooting 7-foot power forward / center, maybe we don't salary dump him, right? Just because everyone else has no money. Like maybe you don't just get rid of him. Like that's an asset that if used correctly and molded to fit the head of the snake, which is Anthony Edwards, that's a dynamic weapon, especially as you just showed earlier with Ant. Like he's going to be double teamed now all the time, and he's going to get really frustrated. But if he knows he can trust Carl to kind of give him that space, all right, glass half full, glass half empty. You hate to see this, right? Like I've been watching all these games too. You and I've been nerding out. It was a day before this game that I think Germany had a bunch of guys get tossed. Like the whistle was really weird. I think Daniel Tice fouled out in the third quarter. But like that right there, doing the technical foul thing, we just have to stop that. And I don't want to pick on him. I'm going to pick on Rudy like crazy in a second here, but we just don't need that. You don't need that sort of extracurricular stuff. Like that waving off a ref, that's an automatic tech in any league. That's an automatic tech in like YMCA basketball league. So I think the shooting threes from 35 feet is much more difficult to like be good at. I think controlling your emotions is something that you can probably rein in a lot quicker, but it's something they got to do, man. Like not everyone's getting tossed from these FIBA games, right? It's like one of the guys who has led the league in fouls or been in foul trouble his whole career. You just don't need that type of stuff there, especially if you got one, right? Like don't do the little wave off again when you know, again, you just led your team to an upset over Canada. You're in a game against Spain, who is a powerhouse even still.
Yeah, they might have beat him if he didn't get ejected in this game. It's 69-63 Spain when Carl gets ejected from this game. I mean,
he's the only one that control it, man. Like he is still, I'm pro Carl. I'm buying the stock. He's an all NBA type guy that's just coming off a bad year. But this is, for as online as I know he is, this is the type of stuff that just feeds the narrative of people not wanting you on their team. You just got to be you got to be bigger than this. You got to be above that type of stuff. Just kill them in silence, run back down court. You don't need this stuff. End rant.
And I mean, I think some people kind of saw this to be like a weak second tech we're putting
Which it
up
is.
there. Like,
That's fine.
I would say it is too. But that because the Dominican didn't play for a while. There'd been I'd watched like 10, 15 other World Cup games or the exhibition games of it, and there's just a higher respect for the game in this. There's the international, like this sounds, I don't know, stupid, but like in this, when somebody falls over from the other team, like the guy from the other team like helps him up. It's not like they clear out of the way and wait for another teammate to run over. There's just like a different, it's super competitive, but there's like a different like respect vibe. And that was the first thing I thought of when I saw Carl doing this and mocking the ref with the technical signal is I'd watched a bunch of the other games, and yeah, I'd seen like frustration. I watched France and Australia play, and those teams like fought like numerous times. There's a lot of blood. But it was like, I don't know. I was obviously there's frustrations with Carl of fouls and technicals throughout his career, but I thought about watching that of like that wasn't good respect for the game, Carl. And and I'm sure he's looking at it after the fact and realizing that too. But these are just the things that need to be rewired in him. And by them continuing to show up, 8, 9 years into his career, it makes people wonder if that even can be rewired. And that's just on him at this point, because like you said, I mean, these are competitive games. You got ejected from the game. You're your team's best player far and away. You're within 6 to Spain. Like, you beat Canada, who entered World Cup as like the second best chance to win it behind the US. And then I think Spain was like third or fourth in it. Like, they could have beat Spain here too, and they didn't because Carl got ejected from the game. And I don't know. These are just the things that you cross your fingers and you hope are not a part of what defines the season this year.
Not all technicals are created equal, no matter what anyone says. Like if you go dunk on a guy to lead a 12-0 run and you come back from something and now you're up 6, like, and you flex on a guy, or like when Ant has literally murdered a couple people on the court, like, just stand. I'm okay. Let's have a little fun. Like, stand over them, get a technical foul, whatever. Right? It's like a big touchdown. You can gritty. That's cool. But this is not that. This is like the other side of the technical spectrum, where it's like you're complaining about things in moments that, again, if you can celebrate a touchdown, you're clear and you got to, whatever, kick off from the 50, that's fine. But in a game that like every point matters, you can't not only give up a free point or free 2 points, you can't remove yourself from the game. Mm-hmm. And that's what that one actually did kind of sting a little bit, is because you let your team down. As old school as that sounds, like, you let your team down by getting removed from that game, and then you lost it. And we've seen that before at the NBA level. Mm-hmm. And I think you worded it really well, like rewiring. Like, can you rewire yourself now as a proven, you've made $250 or $500 million, you've had some of the accolades. Like, now all it is for your brand and the way people talk about you is winning. And the only way you win is if you're on the court doing things that lead to winning, and getting technical fouls in an exhibition is not leading to winning.
Yeah. He often refers to it as adversity when we talk to him after the game. And I mean, it's like, seriously, like he believes this is necessary adversity that he needs to overcome in the refs being that adversity. And I think the adversity is himself, and is thus far inability to consistently overcome that.
Yeah.
And have that control, do that rewiring. I mean, I'm going to go into the season open-minded that he can, and that, more team success, yada, 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 will lead that to be the case, but he's got to prove it. All right, let's move over to Rudy Gobert. We can just kind of talk about Rudy. Here's just a few clips of what stood out to me watching France play. Is they're very like picture Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker Spurs. Like, they're just this super structured team, like heavy play call, but it flows pretty well. And I love watching France play, and it so like effectively highlights Rudy. Like that's nasty right there, you know? I mean, their ability to be able to find him. He's going up against Vucevic right now. That's an NBA center, obviously. They just find him effectively through structure. And I think it's such an interesting like task for Chris Finch to find this balance between structure that benefits Rudy and maybe some other people on the team too, like Conley, Anderson. I would say even Jaden can benefit from structure while also keeping some of that flow that allows, you know, Ant to do the things that he does best and those sort of things. Can Finch effectively thread that needle of structure and flow? Because I just feel very strongly that by turning up the structure dial, you are going to turn up the Rudy production and efficiency and all those sort of things. Because once you start trying to find him within the semblance of like a semi-broken play, he's just not as effective. So that's what I'm going to be tracking with Finch early on, is what does structure look like and mean for this team.
And to tie it all back again to the head of the snake, the franchise player, I think you're learning. I don't know if I knew that Ant could play in a super structured offense 4 weeks ago, right? He seemed like the type of guy that's like, just roll the ball out there, you know, pick up league type stuff and just let him cook. But I mean, Team USA has some structure to what they're doing as well. And you're having him figured out in real time. Now spin it back to Rudy. Rudy Gobert is like, I mean, his accolades are what they are. Like, he's going to make the Basketball Hall of Fame. I know that was a topic earlier this week, but he is a Hall of Famer when he's in structure. But he is low on the totem pole of like JaVale McGee in a pickup setting. So you have to find, and I guess this is the question for you in terms of some criticism. I'm very pro Finch, but I think a lot of times last season, you specifically were frustrated by being like, they need a little more structure. They need a little more like timeout here, run a set play. It can't just all be.
Did. Finch said so afterwards. I think it was just difficult to find what that structure was. And it was more difficult to implement structure when D'Angelo Russell and early season Anthony Edwards were your primary initiators. That's not their ethos as ball handlers. I think you saw more structure once Mike Conley came in. I think I think with Finch, to give Finch a little bit of an out, like maybe he couldn't have done that much structure with the roster he had, but that doesn't mean Rudy didn't need it. And this year you got Conley. You got a guy who can initiate a structured offense. I think I think Team USA is a good reference there, can probably do more of that this year. Like, it needs to be that, because here's a possession from the France game that shows that kind of desperation of trying to feed Rudy in the post. Like, that ain't it. Like, we saw that. I think it's actually encouraging to see that France, these guys who know him as well as anybody, are doing this kind of like forcing him the ball sort of thing. Like, I think there's this, they feel they need to give Rudy touches because he's such an, you know, integral part of the defense. So you got to give him a touch. We got to reward him. And I actually, like, this France play is bad and they don't get him the ball, but it was a reminder to me that even these guys who know
throw it right there. Oh my God.
But see, that's the thing. And on the YouTube channel, you can see this, like, this Nando De Colo, like, he would have thrown this to him, but he fumbles it right there.
Oh, okay.
Like, so, but then they're like, oh fuck, we missed Rudy here. Now we need to find him. And then this just isn't it. Like, what's the best case scenario at that point? Something happens to Gobert teammates where they get tunnel vision of like, this is a possession to get Rudy a touch. We need to do that. And that mentality is dangerous, man. It needs to be, find it when it's there and not over pursue it when it isn't, because those over pursuit situations are like, if he's not diving the basket, if it's not a lob, if it's not in the flow, like, a straight Rudy post up is not going to get you what they seem to think it is. And I just think it's just easy to be like, you know, DeColo, he missed him here, right? Like, my bad, I missed you. Like, let's just get back in the offense and go again. We still have 15 seconds on the shot clock. Like, let's see if we find Rudy again naturally or somebody else does it. Like that can happen. And that, speaking of rewiring, I think is something that Wolves or any teammate of Gobert needs to do with him, is not feel that need and demand, even if he's kind of like complaining to you afterwards, like, be like, trust me, Rudy, I'm going to get you when it makes sense. Because when it makes sense with Rudy Gobert, that's when it's like that 75% true shooting percentage. When it doesn't make sense with Rudy, it is a bad shot. It is a bad move to get him the ball. I think figuring that out is super important. And I was reminded of that watching him play for France.
All right, let's take a 20-second timeout from FIBA stuff for a second and go, this is bigger picture again. And this is, at some point as a society and a civilization, we just need to get over the Rudy Gobert trade, because I still think he's a really good player. And I think most of the guys that gave up now, who are all on minimum contracts, and the Wolves probably don't make the playoffs without Rudy last year, even though hindsight, does Carl get injured, blah, blah, blah. My one concern still that I think will be a concern as long as Rudy is on the team is, I know we just went hard on rewiring Cat's brain, and now it's like the teammates of Rudy need to be rewired as well and know that like there's other options on the court. But this is like my concern about Rudy specifically versus Walker Kessler is like Walker Kessler is just happy to be there. He is just happy to be on the team bus, right? Rudy Gobert at some point needs, this goes back to like that first day of training camp. Finch just needs to pull him into that big movie theater they have at their practice facility and show him all the stuff of like, this is why you're a Hall of Famer, because you protect the rim like no one else. You see all the coverage stuff. You're such a great help defender. You set massive screens, hashtag screen assist, like all that stuff. And then just show him like 3 minutes of him getting the ball with his back to the basket and be like, hey man, you just don't got it. Right? Like, it's like you and I running the YouTube page. Like, we don't got it. Like, let's do other stuff that we're good at. And that need, like, Rudy Gobert was catered to in that first season so much. And you didn't know what Ant was a year ago. I mean, you did to an extent. He had popped a little bit. He had shown some playoff chops. But let's not kid ourselves that like we hoped for this, but we didn't know if this was still in there. And God forbid, there might even be more levels to that. So I'm okay with it. But now it's like, that's done. Like, you had your year trying to figure it out. This is all about that 22-year-old again. And Rudy, like, you can't be, the thing that drives me the most crazy, you can't show up your teammates, right? Like, maybe France was trying to feed him the ball in that one clip you showed, because at the end of the day, it's still like DNP, Evan Fournier, and old Nick Batum. Like, they might have thought, we need a basket here. Maybe Rudy is still our best offensive weapon in a FIBA setting. Like, you know, whatever. Rudy Gobert is always the fifth best option on offense for the Wolves. So having him at any point get the ball in a post-up situation is almost a turnover.
A dive, a lob, like those sort of things, great. You know, that is not the fifth.
And option. So that's the thing I worry about is I think, again, it's the deal is done. What's done is done. I think Rudy Gobert is still a really good player. And he does look, I don't know about you, but I think he looks more spry than he did about a year ago when we watched him in Vegas and kind of that preseason stuff. So that would be good. You'd hope that maybe last year was a down year, partly due to just, I don't know, tired knees, tired legs. And then he'll somehow fix that, even though he's playing in more European basketball again. But that's my concern, is that Walker Kessler, I think, had no problem just being a guy behind Ant. And Rudy needs to know now, too, like, Jaren Jackson's getting touches. He's getting opportunities. He's getting rebounds. He's getting lobs. He's getting, like, he's cutting. He's still getting the ball. But he knows, like, when it's nut crunch time, it's Ant. And he's going to do it. The best thing I can do right now might just be to set a screen for him. Right. So that's part of the rewiring that this entire franchise, from, you know, Glenn Taylor all the way down to the ball boys, is like rewiring of who is in the pecking order, because you can't have that one France play, as minor as it was that you tweeted out. That was like so concerning to me. That can never happen for the Wolves ever. It can never be an option for them, because it's like a turnover. Well,
and it was also in that game kind of like the game Carl got ejected from was close. That was 68-64. A game against Australia is a really competitive game. And there was like 2 minutes left in the game, and that was a 0 possession. And they went on to lose that game. Like this, it seems like you're nitpicking, but when the margins are thin, like the margins are thin, and, you know, it's not just Rudy, it's the teammates and it's the coaching being able to effectively navigate those margins. And the hope is with the Wolves, that, with a year under their belt, they're able to do that a little bit better. Let's grab our second ad break here, and we'll be back. We'll rip through Nickeil, Kyle, Garza. I don't want to show some Spagnolo highlights, so I'm oddly excited about that part. But back with Kyle here in a minute. All right, Kyle. I think Kyle Anderson is the next best Wolves player that's playing in FIBA play, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is the one that has stood out to me a lot more. I've been pretty interested in watching him play, and you're kind of seeing him in this FIBA play. He's kind of plays like 1 through the 3. Like sometimes he initiates, sometimes he's in the corner. But the real thing I've been watching is him shooting a lot of threes in these games. And you kind of like going back and watching, I'm like, why is he getting so many threes? And it's because he's not just taking catch and shoot threes in this anymore. I mean, right here, like these clips playing now are catch and shoot threes, which are things like we feel pretty confident about him being able to do at like, a league average level. I think we've saw him grow as a shooter. Looks like maybe his mechanics are tweaked a little bit more under control. Like I feel confident about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the catch and shoot shooter, but we know there's like a limited volume of those available for anyone. Right. And the question becomes, can he take other threes that aren't just straight open catch and shoot threes? Can they be? Here's another catch and shoot from the corner right there. He hits. They kind of started, and this is the play I wanted to show. Like they started kind of like JJ Redicking him with like some pin downs and stuff.
Oh God.
And I'm like, all right, man, like this ain't it. Like I don't think that's the shooter that he is. That was an air ball right there. Like that's not where you get it. You're not running pin downs for him, design plays to get him threes. But another type of movement is movement with the ball. And I liked what I've seen from Nickeil in his ability to grab, kind of go and run in, dribble into a 3. Like, I love this right here. Like, that's how he boosts.
That's the best 3-pointer he's ever taken in terms of shot form.
Right. And then this play is kind of nasty. It's the same thing. It's like in transition, we're going in a run in 3, and he kind of gives Sergio Llull the whoop right here. And into like that's how I think those type of plays are the ways in which he can shoot more of these, shoot more threes, more than just catch and shoot shots. And in the context of the Wolves offense, like I think this is how he expands his role. So while he's not going to be your traditional running off of, off ball screens, I don't think that's the type of shooter he is. Just kind of, I don't think his mechanics allow him to do it. I think his mechanics allow him to take these step in, run in threes. And it's why I'm kind of optimistic about what Nickeil Alexander-Walker can be as a shooter for this team this year.
I think he's going to be an awesome starting point guard for the Pacers in a couple of years when they trade for Halliburton, who has become Ant's best friend. No, I would make an argument that as much as I wanted to see Carl play in this, just like how are you physically? Because you weren't 100% when you came back after your injury. Nickeil's the one that has the greatest volatility, right? Of like at a bare minimum, you're going to be that guy in the Denver Nuggets series that just hounds Jamal Murray and makes his life tough. As I kind of have said, like literally a condensed, watered down version of Jaden, because they kind of are built the same. I mean, he's obviously a guard, but he's just long and gangly. And
you know who I think he's like, man? And people are gonna be like, what? I don't like this comp because I don't like him as a person. I'm watching him play for Canada, and I think he has a weirdly similar game to Dylan Brooks.
Oh, Dylan Brooks. Okay. I thought you said someone we don't like. Dylan Brooks. Okay. Dylan Brooks is a little thicker though. So why that?
But it's not, but it's just like Dylan Brooks is going to take those step in threes. He's going to get a screen and he's going to come in and pull like a mid-range shot, get all the way to the basket, while his bread and butter is the like in your grill defender, like no space, whatever. I was just watching, like Canada has like can put out like a pretty
kind of nasty team,
defensive lineup. I actually don't think Canada's overall good in this, but I was like watching them play, and they had like Dort, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Dylan Brooks all on the floor at the same time. Like that's a hell of a perimeter defensive wall. But I don't know. I know Dylan Brooks and Nickeil Alexander-Walker look nothing alike, and their personalities are even more different than they don't look alike. But that was just a thought I had watching Canada play. Like, there's some similarities there, and with Nickeil maybe being a little, like, definitely being lower usage than Brooks is, but having some of that ability to do a little bit off the bounce offensively, while still not being like an awesome shooter. But I don't know. I think Nickeil has more layers to his game that I think could potentially be developed than just being what he was in the Denver series, which was an awesome on-ball defender and a guy who sprinted to the corner. Like, he can do that, and that's a 3-and-D, right? That's a 3-and-D role player. Like, I think he can be that guy. The question I have is, can he be more? And I think given his ball skills and his ability to kind of dribble into shots, that's something I think he can bring that maybe we're not really expecting here.
Anthony Edwards has played more games in the NBA than Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Yeah.
Like, just like in terms of thinking back to the trade deadline and what was a pretty pivotal move, right? To get not only your starting point guard for now, Mike Conley, but this other kind of guy that's just been, due to injuries and bouncing around to a couple teams, just hasn't popped. I mean, I know he's like 24 now, but that's still young. I think at this point, if a lottery pick or a high first round pick hasn't blossomed by 24, we're just kind of out on them. But as we kind of get into season preview stuff, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is like one of the 5 most intriguing aspects of this team because, I mean, can he run second unit? Can he play alongside Ant in like an Austin Reeves type of role, right? Like, Austin Reeves is way nastier offensively and a better shooter, but Nickeil can do a lot of the stuff that Austin can do defensively, and that's when you lean into point Ant and you have Nickeil next to him. Some of the rebounds he's gotten in these exhibition games, he's just way more athletic than I kind of remember. And then, some of those corner threes that you highlighted earlier in those clips, those were those threes he was hitting against Denver, right? Like, when I think he maybe airballed one or missed one, he had the confidence a couple possessions later to take another one, and he hit it, and it was kind of a pivotal moment in that game. So seeing him kind of have the space to do some creative things for Canada is another reason why this whole FIBA thing has been really awesome, because I've talked to you about this in the summer, right? Like, the point guard depth is still a concern.
Sure.
Because Minnesota Mike is a legend already, but I just think even if he's available, you should only play him 60 games because you want him for hopefully April and maybe, God forbid, May. Who's going to fill that backup role? It's got to be probably more than just a Jordan McLaughlin. And I think Nickeil is showing you that, like, he can probably step in and fill that role. And it's not as bad as you think for depth.
And at least, like, in tandem with Ant, like, is there a way to finagle the rotation so that when Nickeil is the quote unquote point guard out there, Ant is also out there and then actually taking on maybe the majority of the initiation? But I'm with that too. Yeah, I think I would recommend, like, I mean, everyone's going to try and watch Ant. That's a Wolves fan, but I think Canada, like, bang for your buck intrigue from an NBA Wolves perspective. You get a bunch of Canadian NBA players, and then Nickeil plays a lot for them, or at least has in the exhibition games. And you get to see him do a little bit more than you've probably ever seen him do, because he wasn't allowed to do a lot of stuff for the Wolves last year. And then I think France is fun, man. I think they might win it. I think they might beat the US. But
can you imagine if Anthony Edwards has a similar dunk on Rudy Gobert like he did in that game the other day against Germany? Like, that will, I'll put a pin in that. That could cause some interesting moments in the locker room.
All right, let's rip through Anderson, Garza, and Spagnolo here quickly. Here, Anderson, this has been the one that's been tough. China's just not very good, and Anderson is like their best player. Like, just watch these. Everything looks so difficult for Anderson because they just, like,
he almost died. I'm not laughing, but I'm laughing.
I mean, that was a good pass. Like, it worked, but it is just like these weird post ups for Anderson all the time, and they, like, it's just doubled in the post. It's just impossible for Kyle to do anything because he just has so little around him. They have they got like a 7-2 center on their team, and so they're like try and run some of those like Kyle the Rudy sort of things, and it's like here's kind of like a high-low type thing that they try to do. It just doesn't work. China's a little bit of a tough watch, but it is cool. Like Kyle is pretty heavily focused on for that team because he's their best player. Weirdly comes off the bench. I don't know if that's like I don't know what that's about. But yeah, I don't have much on Kyle Anderson, but he is playing there as well. And if you do turn on a China game, like you're going to see plenty of Kyle Anderson.
Kyle Anderson reminded me, because I watched one of those games because you kind of flagged it for me, that he reminded me of why I'm actually sometimes okay when star players on really bad teams demand a trade. Because as much as we're like, basketball is beautiful and there's so much respect for the international game, and look at these sets that France runs, it's like basketball porn, and then it's like watch China, it's just like, that's what I imagine being like a college stud and then going back and playing pickup is like, just triple teamed every time and you can't rely on any of your teammates. So I did, someone did tell me that, like, for Kyle, because I think a lot of people are like, why is he doing this China thing? It sounds like it means the absolute world to him, and he had to go through a lot of hoops, like in terms of citizenship, to play for China. So I think he knew what he was biting off when he kind of went for that, knowing he's not going to be playing with really like any NBA caliber teammates. But for him and his family and his kind of lineage, I've been told that it's very, very important for him. So you're probably not going to get as much out of that as any of these other guys. But I think it is cool that he is playing at an international level and trying to represent a country that means a lot to him.
Right. The next up,
here we go, baby.
Luka Garza, who isn't playing in the World Cup. This was like an Olympic qualifier that Bosnia and Herzegovina were playing in over August. But there's like 6-7 games out there that Garza played in. What was just interesting to me is these clips here are Garza playing with Nurkic. Which happened a lot. And obviously, I mean, I don't anticipate Luka being in the rotation at all, but if that comes at some point this season, it will be next to at least a Cat or Nas, right? Like he's going to have to play alongside another big. And I just, I think it was encouraging and good reps here. I actually want to show this one too. That he got ample opportunity here to play next to a true NBA center in Yusuf Nurkic. And like, the spacing wasn't that funky. Like they can both kind of shoot the three. I low-key think like Garza really can shoot it. I was like thinking to myself, like, who do I think is a better shooter between Luka Garza and Naz Reid? Like if it just went like empty gym 3-point contest, I think Luka Garza would maybe beat Naz Reid just in a 3-point contest. But anyways, I thought it was interesting to see him playing next to a big. And then also you can kind of see in these clips, he's just way thinner. And this one I put in here just to show him running the floor. I mean, it's still not pretty. That's faster than it has been before. I think, continuing to cut weight. I mean, I want to ask him how much he's cut since Iowa, because I would imagine it's 25. I mean, it's kind of like a Nas thing there too, where he's shed a bunch of weight over the time that he's been in the league to kind of become more of a big who can play alongside another big or move a little bit quicker that's always going to be his biggest weakness. But I don't know. I found Garza to be interesting, even though it's just a two-way player for the Wolves.
He's like when Kevin Love got a girlfriend and like started taking like care of like his body and like getting leaner and drinking more wine and stuff, because you're running some of the same clips here, but his shot looks really good for a guy that, again, we didn't really, watch him play and has almost been kind of anecdotal to this roster.
Yeah.
But also too, like he is not Naz Reid in terms of athleticism. Literally, just he's not like he's not a vertical guy, but he does such a good job of like sealing off his guy, getting offensive rebounds.
Huge offensive rebound. That's a good point to bring up. Like he's thinner and whatever, but he is still an absolute force on the inside, offensive rebounding wise. Like, and maybe we need to see that against NBA competition. He's kind of playing against some more random guys in this, but I don't think like losing 20 pounds is going to cost Luka Garza what he's best at as a basketball player, which is the space he can create around the basket and the offensive rebounds he can get there. Like, I think that can exist while he gets, faster. And I mean, sometimes you're watching him playing these games, and I'm not kidding you. It's like every time Bosnia misses a shot, he might not get the offensive rebound, but he like tips it. Like, he's one of those players, kind of like Valanciunas, or like Valanciunas is like the peak of this, who it's like, all right, they have a lot of speed flaws and stuff like that, but at some point the offensive rebounding begins to balance that out. Like, maybe you're costing your team some points defensively, but how many additional possessions are you generating with offensive rebounds? You watch Garza play, particularly in this context, again, lower level of play, or if you watch him play in the G League last year, you go, man, I almost just want to see him play a couple of games, 25 minutes, whatever, to see what type of force he is inside. Because in snippets, it looks like it could be like a Valanciunas type of player, offensive rebounding and forceful underneath the basket.
Again, compliments to him and his like training. I mean, I know he's kind of befriended Rudy, and he was traveling with Rudy earlier this summer and like working out with him. And Rudy, for his flaws, is like never not taking care of his body. So there's just an ab challenge there with those two guys, but he's not losing anything on the court by losing physical weight off of it. And I think, again, his footwork, like that's the thing that if you put one word onto all these FIBA guys that we're watching, his footwork is like, he just is really, really skilled around the basket. And I think because we didn't get to watch a lot of them, the consensus has been, or the debate has been through like, I guess like Wolf's Twitter would be, is he an NBA guy, right? Because you guys can dominate the G League, but still struggle to play in the league. But I think Luka Garza is actually benefiting from the fact of like, if he would have come in 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I don't think he would have made it, because there was like such an emphasis on 5 out, and he can shoot, but like small ball. I think he can do a little now, like as the league is now embracing bigger lineups again and bigger front courts. I don't know how he's going to play barring any injury when you have Rudy and Carl and Nas and all that money. But, tip of the cap, as minor as it is, to Tim Connelly for keeping him around, because it's another guy that you've kind of developed. And depending on how this roster looks 12 months from now, he might be a key bench piece for this team. And he's showing that he continues to get better, which is kind of all you want from a guy that doesn't play much in the league, but has a lot of skill that he can give to a team.
Yeah, I personally think he is an NBA player, like maybe a end of the bench at best, like fringe rotation type of guy. But like, that's cool on a two-way for me. Like, when we talking about that with Brandon Williams, like we're like, oh yeah, this guy's super small and like he'd never be able to, he was on the summer league team for the Wolves. Like, why would they get a guy who like wouldn't be able to play in the playoffs? I'm like, it's a two-way player. You're not looking for somebody who can contribute for the playoffs. You're looking for a player on a two-way that if something happens to the starter or the backup at that position, then they can be reliably plugged in for a week or two to a bit role. And I think with Luka Garza, as far as two-way players go, like I'm confident about that in him. That's not huge praise. That's just saying he's a good two-way player. But like, let's see how this continues to develop. I'm very interested, because be a restricted free agent again next season, coming off the two-way. Like, maybe he is. Maybe you don't have Cat, Rudy, and Nas next year. I bet you don't. I assume you don't have all three of them. Can he be that third guy? I mean, he has to have a good year. He has to continue to develop. The lost weight needs to lead to more foot speed. Like, there's questions there, but I do think he's a roster player in the NBA who's on a two-way.
This sounds mean, but it's not. It's just what you want from that end of the bench, might never play two-way guy. He's better than Nate Knight, because when Nate would come in, Nate was really hunting his own stuff. And I think Luka Garza, even in a garbage time situation, is still going to come in and like offensive rebounds or set good screens. He might not score, but he's kind of the prototypical guy you want right now in terms of break glass in case of emergency. You have a guy that you can trust that's going to, be able to do the fundamental stuff to keep the ship afloat. Yep.
That's all we're saying. I'm not.
Now let's get into the star power. Let's do it. Let's end on
I had to put Spagnolo in here, and honestly, I haven't watched a bunch of like their full games or anything, but I've just been like going through his clips, and I will preempt this with having watched Nickeil Spagnolo at Summer League, not this year, but the year before playing for the Wolves, I was like 0% chance this guy is an NBA player.
Hater.
0. And I mean, because I was like, he looked undersized. He wasn't a real shooter. Like, he had like a good 3-point percentage overseas, but he was not shooting, or he didn't really take that many over there. He's not like your typical white dude shooter at all. And I was like, I do not understand what this player is. I didn't know what the things to be intrigued with him are, but just watch this like 60 seconds. I mean, it's just fun. Like, I mean, the passing is, as you just saw on that clip right there. I mean, and he looks big. I mean, I don't know if you get like a little grainy footage of FIBA here, but he's for sure bigger. I would say thicker and taller, and more of a capable looking jump shot like we're seeing there. And to be fair, these are just threes. I'm only showing plays where the ball goes in the basket, but I mean, I've changed my mind. I think there's a chance that this is an NBA player, and he's going to be playing in EuroLeague this next season, like at basically the highest level he can be playing overseas. And then there's this possibility, that's a dime, that he's on this Wolves team, a year from now. You talk about the need for backup point guard down the line. Like, I'm not saying that it's a 50% chance that it's him, but I have changed my mind from 0% chance to like, this is maybe an NBA player here too, who kind of fits a need. Oh yeah, these two plays are sick right here. Look at this one. This pass to the corner.
This is great for the audio.
Nasty.
Only.
Right here. Look at that. Well, go on YouTube. Watch it.
The Italian. Listen, man. The Italian stallion is. As I know, I just said that Luka Garza is better than Nate Knight. And I know we're just comping all the white guys right now, but
look at this dunk.
He's better, and he is flashed. And you texted me this, I think, the other day. He's showing more on this level than like Balmero did, right? And I'm not just trying to comp international foreign white guys, but the Balmero thing is also like he was the third pick in that collection of Ant, Jaden, and then Balmero, right? Spagnolo was kind of that third pick in, because when was he drafted?
2 years ago, 50th. So
my brain just completely froze as they're just blowing up buildings in front of my place here. So he's just, I understand if Wolves fans are like, well, he hasn't come over yet. He didn't play in the summer league, which was pretty a bummer because it wasn't like, we don't really.
Yeah, it was like a back or hernia type thing.
But,
I forgot what it was.
But then soon after, I mean, he was practicing with him. He was around. And then after he signed, like you had said too, like a good deal with a big team, which I think you've probably heard the same. I think there are NBA outs in that contract. I always think of the Rubio thing as like, okay, if you sign an international contract, do you have outs? I feel like all these guys now have outs in their contract to escape and get to the NBA. But he's another one that's like, I'm still actually going to be pessimistic and be like, I got to see it at the NBA level. But just having another guy down the road who is going to be a cheap asset for your team, as we're 6, 7, 8, 9 months away from talking only about the salary cap, that's a big deal because you need guys like this to be able to contribute for cheap. You need the Leonard Millers of the world to be able to contribute for cheap. So I think he's looked great for Italy, and they're a real kind of, they're not a tier 1 force in this FIBA thing, but they're
on though, right? Like, that's all I'm saying is, if you're sitting around in August, September here, like this is right before football season starts, and like you're like me and you're not watching baseball, like I turn it on, man. Like I think all these guys, every single one that we went through, and unfortunately Garza is not playing in it, but like, again, what I like about FIBA play is seeing all of these players play in a different but bigger role than they normally play in the NBA. And that, I think, if you're nerdy like us, can be like super instructive in, kind of honing your opinion for better or worse. I mean, I think we highlighted, we're pretty glass half full with all of that, but like, even with Kyle Anderson, you're like, all right, Kyle Anderson's probably what he is for the Wolves, that's about what it is. Like, he doesn't need to be a top 3 player on a team. Like 5 or 6 is fine, but it's instructive. And watching this stuff, I don't know. I've enjoyed it in a dead time, and I appreciate you humoring me to hop on here.
6'4" without shoes, 198 pounds.
Spagnolo, yeah.
So I mean, we can get him up. Just give him a week of eating in the Midwest, and he'll fatten right up, just like I always do. But 6'4" without shoes. I mean, that's a nice size guard. Who, again, when you draft these kind of Euro stashes, if they don't come over and contribute right away or play in like some sort of summer league performance, you kind of just forget about him. So he's a real thing. They have his rights. It'll be interesting to see him play. I'm sure there's some Wolves fan that's going to be recording and watching all of his games, which I love. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on him. And this is kind of the last free opportunity we're going to get to watch him, right? Because these FIBA games are usually on TV. It's when he goes to play for Europe that we're not going to be able to, we have to really try to find him. But you get a couple weeks of the Italian Stallions. So enjoy that along with all the other main cogs of this Wolves thing. You got anything else?
I think that's it. I mean, we went a little bit longer than.
What do you think of the jerseys? You were gone that weekend. I flew back. Michael Grady and I went to a Young Gravy concert. It was about as weird as we all thought it would be. But what do you think about the jerseys?
Don't like them.
Okay.
I mean, but I'm not like, I don't know. It's not a big thing that I care about. I don't know. It's a little too basic for me, I guess. I don't, and so like, what am I even saying here of like, oh, I don't like it. I don't have a suggestion for what it is. I'd really like Anthony Edwards to design the city uniform for next season. Like,
just thirsty and just big bold Helvetica across the chest.
Get him in the room, and like we do the, and I get it. Like, the point of the city jersey, right, is to represent Minnesota, right? And the culture of Minnesota. I would be more interested in representing the culture of the players and how they see that overlapping with Minnesota. And I think that's a lot easier said than done. I mean, I don't think they're like an eyesore. Like, they're way better than those lime green ones, I thought. But it's not like, you're kind of like waiting out for it. You're like, you're hoping to open up the email and see it for the first time, being like, oh, that's dope. Like, I would have
loved to have also seen them the first time ever not on Young Gravy. Like maybe someone else debuted him, like Nas Reed, just like Hulk Hogan his shirt and there's his jersey. But I think the cool part is that I was pretty anti the ones last year. And last year, if you would have given that jersey, the city jersey, the Kid Picks ones, you would have been like, I need you to explain this to me. This you can at least look at, like, that's water. It says Land of 10,000 Lakes. So I think brilliant idea.
Like, I like the ones from last year more than these, actually.
And also too, like the bar is set with those Prince jerseys. No one will ever beat that. And I'm still hopeful that maybe the Wolves will have one more jersey to debut this, like maybe like a hardwood classic. But at some point, this, and you can't just make every jersey trees. By the way, you can't just have the tree stuff on every single jersey. But I do hope that at some point, when this ownership, I tweeted this other day, but when this ownership thing wraps up, hopefully in a couple months, and it's kind of a new face of the franchise at that, C-suite level, that you bring Kevin Garnett back in, you have this other kid who is probably the most hope you've had since Kevin Garnett left, and that you embrace some of those. I mean, the Wolves don't have a lot.
Kevin Garnett can go into the room with Ant with the colored pencils to draw the new city uniform. Those two, that's
a track the pack right there. Just Ant and KG just drawing up jerseys. So no, I wanted to get your opinion on that. I'm sure the schedule stuff, to me, I was like, I don't even know what we talk about that. Like, I've seen people do 82 game previews. It's like, I don't know. They're going to play, but I do think we're starting to ramp up again. We are less than 1 month out, I believe, from like this thing really taking off. The Wolves will do their media stuff a little earlier this year because they're going again to Abu Dhabi or whatever. So, this is probably the best offseason you can have in a while, right? Like, you have a really talented team. We're going to do a ton of previews. We got this YouTube thing. You got FIBA for the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be like real deal NBA stuff before we know it. So enjoy your last couple of weeks of summer before it gets cold, at least in the Midwest, and we'll have a lot more of these coming up.
For sure. Yeah, I would just again say, put it into your mind that these podcasts exist on YouTube as well. I mean, like personally, I'm not a YouTube podcast watcher, so I get it if it's your thing to listen to the pod on, the treadmill or whatever it might be. That's totally fine. Like, do that. It's just the idea is that we can do some more things here. I'll be able to do some other things on the YouTube channel that are maybe like just film breakdowns that aren't even an episode that shows up on the podcast feed. But just have that in your mind. Yeah, again, just search Dane Moore on YouTube or youtube.com/@DaneMooreNBA. And then the only other thing, I mean, we're still going to be pretty low volume here for the next few weeks with episodes, but keep that Craig Kilborn live show on your mind. September 7th, first day NFL season starting that day. Keep that in your mind. We'll be going at like 6 o'clock. So, come early. I'll be there setting up 5:30. So love to see you guys out there at Falling Knife. And then again, as I mentioned before, as we're, soliciting advertisers, DaneMooreProductions@gmail.com if that's something that your company or brand are interested in getting into. Until then, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Follow Kyle at Kyle Theige on X. I'm at Dane Moore NBA. Yeah. Until next time, it's Kyle and Dane. Peace out.
Hey, yeah. I feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.